Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. This session is about why code switching and mixing. And I hope and expect by the end of this session, you would have an idea of what are the reasons or what are the causes behind code switching and code mixing. Well, thinking about the idea of why do people code switch? Of course, this is not random. Of course, this is not out of a random choice. This is with certain reasons. This is with some logic. There is something that happens at the background. What is that happens? Most of the times, switching is in response to some kind of triggering. What is this triggering? Maybe due to a new addressee or a new topic or a new domain that you are talking about. So, for example, if a person A is talking to person B. During this conversation, for example, person A is talking to person B in language X. Now, while talking in language X, there is a possibility that there would be a switching to language Y. Why it would happen? It would happen because if there is a change in the topic during the conversation, if there is a change in the domain of, in which you are talking. So, for example, if you are talking about government issues and then you switch over to media, or then you switch over to entertainment and fashion, for example, or you start talking about some family life, as there is a switch of a domain, there is a possibility of a switch of, language as well. The switching can also take place when people are talking in groups. So, for example, if there are these interlocutors A, B, and C, and they are talking in language X, when A is talking to B, probably A would be using language X, but as soon as A talks to C, if the nature of this addressee is different from B, a switch can take place. So, for example, if I am in my office and the people present in my room are, for example, me, my colleague, and my office maid. What would happen? I would talk to my colleague in English as I would be discussing some official matters. And during that, I would switch over to Urdu as I address my maid to kindly serve tea or to bring in some file or document, etc. In the same way, when I am talking to my colleague, if there is a switch in the topic, for example, first I was talking to my colleague about some official issue, and then suddenly I start talking about, the evening function where we are going. So there is a possibility that there would be a switch. I would talk about the official issues in English language, but as soon as there would be a switch in the topic or the domain of conversation, I would switch from English to Urdu, and I would say in Urdu. I would discuss that event in the evening in Urdu language. Well, my dear students, code switching can arise from individual choice or be used as a majority identity marker for a group of speakers who must deal with more than one language in their common pursuits. So, think of a situation where, for example, a group of 5-6 people who are sitting and are having some kind of a formal discussion, let's suppose an academic discussion, and all these speakers, for example, are speaking in Urdu at this moment, let us suppose, and then one person enters the room. This person now is a Pashto speaker. This person would exchange greetings with all the people and then would talk to another person within this group who is a Pashto speaker otherwise, who is a Pathan otherwise, in Pashto language. And that person would start speaking to this person in Pashto. So this switch is made for, kind of individual identities, and it also, can reflect group identities where, there are more than 2 people. Gall 1988 asserts code switching is a conversational strategy that is used for various purposes. For example, it is used to establish, to cross, or to destroy group boundaries. There is group A, there is group B. Or there is group A and there are different people in that. To establish group boundaries, that A is different from B, group A is different from group B, you would change the language that you don't belong to this group, you belong to the other group. Or you cross the boundaries. You know, you are a part of this group at this time, but in the next minute, you cross the boundaries and you become a part of the other group by changing language. According to Gall, it is also used to create, evoke, or change interpersonal relationships with their rights and obligations. You know, because the language you speak, it gives you a certain kind of an identity. So, you know, when a doctor is talking to a doctor, or when a doctor is talking to a nurse and using a particular language, for example, English, then, you know, being in the role of a doctor and being in the role of a nurse, they are, you know, dealing with all the rights and obligations of using that language. And then the doctor addresses the person who is sitting, you know, across the table and who is a friend, or is talking to the same nurse who, you know, is familiar otherwise. So switching to Urdu language, for example, would change completely, you know, the kind of psychological perspective in which they are working or operating. So this was about switching. When it comes to mixing, why do people mix? Nature of the choice or the choice of mixed elements that are used, it varies due to so many factors, such as motivation. You know, there's a motivation to use a particular language. You mix the words of that. Discourse functions. The meaning cannot be communicated through a particular word in a proper way. So, for example, even if I am speaking in Urdu, I want, for example, my IT man to bring me, for example, the computer. So even if I am using Urdu, for example, कि आप ऐसा करें कि मुझे कंप्यूटर ला दें और उसके माउस को देख लीजिएगा. So the choices of computer and mouse, they help me perform this discourse function. Otherwise, it would be very difficult. There are no words that are available in Urdu for that. Social standing. Sometimes we mix words of another language to show our social status. In Pakistan, mixing of a lot of English into Urdu is done for this particular reason. Depending upon who are the speakers, who are the interlocutors with whom you are talking, these mixes would depend upon that as well. Setting the immediate context, the situation in which the whole conversation or interaction is taking place also matters in deciding whether there would be mixing or not, and if there would be mixing, what would be the frequency and nature of that mixing. Apart from these social reasons, there can be purely linguistic reasons, because when languages come in contact, you know, there are certain ways in which words can be inserted, and there are certain ways where words cannot be fit in. Let me give you an example. For example, if I say, ये कितनी खूबसूरत किताब है, this is a perfectly, or ये let me change the, for example, the utterance. Instead of, you know, using खूबसूरत किताब, which in a way it makes sense, ये कितना खूबसूरत फूल है. If in English I would say, how beautiful this flower is. But in mixed code, when I choose, for example, when I say ये how beautiful फूल है, so this is not going to make any sense. How beautiful phool hai. This structure does not work in Urdu mixing, because there is a constraint in the linguistic structure that does not allow of mixing of this how beautiful in the Urdu structure. Ye how beautiful phool hai. We do not speak like that. Whereas there are other phrases that we can use. So, you know, there are particular linguistic constraints that do not allow the use of certain phrases or the mixing of certain words in certain ways in the structures of a particular language. According to Trudgill, speakers wish to manipulate or influence or define the situation as they wish, and to convey nuances of meaning and personal intention. What he means by this is, sometimes one particular word in a language does not convey exactly the idea or the thought or the notion that you want to present. and you borrow a word from some other language, and that, you know, the subtle difference in meaning cannot be communicated in the lexical items available in the language that originally you are using. In that case, a word is borrowed from one language to the other. An oft quoted example in this case that is given from our context is, for example, when somebody utters, "I love you." This word love in English has a generalized meaning, whereas Urdu has two words for it, muhabbat and ishq. And for that, the second choice, we do not have any word as an equivalent in English. So, you know, every language has its own peculiarities of meanings that are attached to certain words, and sometimes people choose those words because they want to express their thoughts in those particular ways. So these linguistic choices that are made in code mixing are not only determined by the immediate context needs, but also they are, you know, chosen by the broader context, and there are a lot of social, cultural, as well as linguistic constraints and, you know, factors that contribute their role in this regard.